Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. Created by speakers for speakers. It's your fast track to sharper skills, bigger impact, and a smarter speaking business. Subscribe and download using the link below. And step into the spotlight.
Greetings. I'm Shanita Akintonde, host of Speakernomics podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Marki Rhyal, who is the president of Remarkable LLC, but more importantly, she's a fellow Southsider of Chicago, just like yours truly, which is why I am Chicago hot dog happy and Garrett's popcorn proud to introduce all of you to this wonderful lady. And I should back up and say, introduce to some and remind others because her reputation precedes her. She is a best-selling author, an educator, an expert in artificial intelligence, as well as human intelligence, which for that latter topic, we're going to dive deep. Whether it's to talk about Lim's Barbecue, which is where her family name comes from, and or that popcorn and those hot dogs I mentioned a moment ago. As the author of The Front Porch Leader myself, I am very versed in what it takes to have real conversations with real people. So I want you to sit back and join me as we launch into that kind of dialogue today. And pull out your popcorn, your hot dogs, your barbecue, or whatever satisfies your goat as we get going today. Thanks. And let's launch into the podcast. Okay. Welcome to another special edition of Speakernomics, where we, within the National Speakers Association, pull back the curtain and look under the rug so that we can give speakers to tips and tools for them to become better in their businesses, to thrive, to not just look like they're trying to be on the stage, but to do so with purpose and passion. And with that being said, it gives me a great deal of passion to introduce a passionate woman herself, Miss Marki Rhyal, who, as we were talking before we got on this podcast, discovered that we have some history, us both being Chicagoans, and I'm a native Southsider of Chicago. And as we were conversing, she shared with me a staple within our city, Lim's Barbecue, which we will talk more about when we get into the entrepreneurship side of her coin and this business of speaking, because that is a staple in the community, a staple in the world, Lim's Barbecue, with thus her last name being Rhyal. Now, before we jump in, I'm going to tell you about this woman. I told her this, but I will tell you all this, dear listeners, viewers, however you're receiving this podcast. Marki Rhyal is a best-selling author. She's an entrepreneur. She's obviously a speaker as a member of the National Speakers Association, but she's an expert in artificial intelligence and things that are related to, before it became a buzzword, AI. And so we're going to dive deeper into that today, along with some other things. However, to rewind, before we mark into that, Miss Marki, tell me something. Tell me about human intelligence and what your thoughts are about that, either how it parlays into this topic of artificial intelligence or just what, when you hear the word human intelligence, that means to you. Does it relate? Are we losing it? And I will hand the mic over to you to start us off with your response to that first question, please. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. One thing that I think about when it comes to human intelligence, my mother made me go to college. And she says, Marki, a degree is the one thing no one can ever take from you. Once you have the education, it is yours to keep. But well before going to college, I have been born and raised on the south side of the city of Chicago in a community called Inglewood. I have common sense, street sense, and book sense. And everyone doesn't have that. And to me, that's the human element. I often talk about lived experiences. I had lived experiences before I started leveraging artificial intelligence. So I think that there's a generation of people who are applying their lived experience. You can't take away from me the undergrad degree, the master's degree, the 66 real estate related licenses, designations, and certifications, because once I obtained that knowledge, it was mine to be able to keep. And so for me and my generation of people, we are applying our previous knowledge to a tool that allows us to repurpose and do things that traditionally we would not have been able to do. I can't speak to what this means to my 30-year-old son or to my 19-year-old son if they're only solely relying on it. But I will tell you that I'm educating them the same way that their grandmother educated me, so that they will have something that no one can take away from them. If a person is solely relying on it, I think they're going to have a problem because they don't have lived experiences to apply to it.
You just dropped some gems, some coins, some nuggets, all of the above with that first response. So, listeners, you are in for a treat, as you can see with Miss Marki. I love what you said about the idea of needing to have a balance. It sounds like, Marki, you can't just go into life without the experiences, the book smarts, the street smarts, the in between smarts. You have to have all of that to be successful in life, and definitely to be successful, I think you would agree, as a speaker. Things are going to get tossed at you. You have to be able to pivot and navigate spaces and rooms and places, and particularly you and I, Marki, as women of color. Yes, I'm going to go here, NSA. Us both on this platform. Again, honored to interview you. This is unique. It should not be to have both of us, folks who look like us, on the screen at the same time, celebrating in the same space. An organization as old as NSA is, we need to have more representation, more voices, more sights, sounds, and experiences from people who look like us, who have the ability, and I like to call it being hidden in plain sight, quite candidly. I don't know how long have you been a member. I'll ask you this in a moment, of NSA. Myself personally, over 20 some plus years.
Wow.
I've been a member of this wonderful group, correct? And yeah, I was six. I was six when I joined it.
You was young. They
But
came and plucked you off the playground.
yes, I said, NSA, what is that? And I leaped over the ice cream truck. But the point is, there are so many voices that have things to say and share that will benefit not only audiences, but our peers and colleagues alike. I think you'll agree. But so let's talk specifically more about AI, because you are an expert in that area as much as you are in other areas. And as I said earlier, before it was a bzz word, what did you see, Marki, that you think some of us may have not seen or may have missed or are still missing as it pertains to that space?
Well, for me, when I think about artificial intelligence, I can actually go back and measure everything that I've been doing ever since September the 13th, 2015, with a simple tool called Grammarly. What I know as a result of using Grammarly since September 13, 2015, is that they have analyzed over 17 million words on my behalf. We were
Mhm.
being AI'd before Chat GPT, whether we knew it or not. Even through the algorithms of your Uber and your Lyft, there was already artificial intelligence being used, but now it's available to the masses for little to no cost. And so when I go back and I look at just Grammarly alone, every single week, they tell me about my tone. They tell me about my style, but they let me know about my productivity. And
Mm.
what I know now, because of artificial intelligence, on any given week, I am among the top 10% out of 40 million users leveraging Grammarly. And that has told me, or is a direct correlation to the fact that once I started using AI intentionally, that I saw a substantial increase in my productivity, lead generation, and my income. Since leveraging ChatGPT, I've gone from 13,000 to over 44,000 people in my customer relationship management system. So AI has shown me the correlation between my actions, productivity, lead generation, and income.
Wow. And the idea of us being AI'd, and I like that we made it a verb, like Googled it, it's really a part of your culture. when it becomes a verb. But you said something important. This isn't new. Nothing's new under the sun, as they say, but this isn't new. So we've been doing it. Grammarly, I'm a big proponent of that. I use Grammarly as well. And I'll be honest, I love it when it shows me my stats. Like it says things like, you've been working it, girl, or whatever it says. And I'm like, yes, it's a motivational, like a cheerleader of kind, right, to you. But there's a bit of mystery, Marky, still around AI, and whether you use ChatGPT or Claude or other tools, there's always something out here that people are recommending. What do you personally either recommend or tell folks to use to increase their workflow? As you just pointed out, that's monumental what you just shared, those numbers and that shift. What
Well,
would you recommend for people to use, or how do you recommend that they utilize it if you want to take a step back, to maximize on their end the use
let
of
me
it?
take a step back. And the reason I'm taking a step back is because we are now seeing the generative platform war, whether that's going to be ChatGPT, Gemini,
Mhm.
AI, Perplexity, or Claude, right? Every other week, one is the best at something. But I do want to take it a step back. I will tell you, I now train high performing midlife professionals as a result of being diagnosed with menopause. And what I know is that artificial intelligence will do for your business what hormone replacement therapy will not do. And so, what I was doing well before I even leveraged Chat GPT is I was sitting in this same office with this same headset or brand on my head, and I was doing audio input. Audio input means that you're going to increase your productivity 3 to 4 times because we all speak 3 to 4 times faster than we type text or write. So I actually just made a Facebook post and I asked people, where are your wearables at, right? So I'm leaving home with my Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and I'm also leaving home with Claude around my neck to record everything. I
Mm.
record everything. But the reason that I record everything is I launched Social Selling Made Simple podcast in January of 2019. And a year later, I wrote my first international bestseller. I have a total of six. But once I wrote that first one, I was able to double my speaking fee. And so I doubled the speaking fee because I was recording everything sitting in my office with a headset. So before you even get to artificial intelligence itself, I would like for us to change our method of input in order to be more productive. I also like to feed AI a lot of content. The better and the more content you give it, the better the results you're going to receive. I've increased my input because I use audio. I have my own studies for the organizations that I work for. Some of it is gated information, some of it is non gated that I'm using as a foundation. And then I always speak in my voice, style, and tone because Grammarly essentially tells me every single week what my tone is and whether or not there are going to be any changes. So before you go use the platform, I think we need to gather information and change how we're communicating in order to maximize the return on time.
Yes, very well said. I think a lot of people just rush in, to your point, and start to use these platforms or these tools, but without the proper input. Like what goes in is what's going to come out. So the input is key. The prompts, it sounds like the things that you tactically, strategically, intentionally put into these tools will definitely assist in getting what you want on the other side to look like what it needs to, right?
And I agree with that. And let me say this, because only 1% of the world has a paid subscription, everyone hears Claude and they want to go and use Claude. Claude is, to me, the hardest of the platforms to use. Therefore, I think everybody should start on ChatGPT or with a Gemini AI account because they are simpler to use. Where Claude, you got your browser extension, you have your browser, and you have your desktop download, right? It's a lot going on and it might be confusing. I want them to start where it is easiest for them to start. And if they're a Google user, it would be Gemini AI. If they're not a Google user, let's even say they're Microsoft, even though I am not a fan of Copilot, then Copilot might be the place for them to get started because they're already inside of that interface. They kind of understand what things are. And I would equate this to when people are on the internet and they ask their friends, what phone should they get, right? And everybody has a recommendation. I don't ask that question. I ask, what is your current operating system? Because that's going to dictate the phone you should get. Because there's one thing to learn a new phone, it's another thing to learn a new operating system. So if you're using generative platforms for the first time, I think you should use a tool that correlates with what you were already using. And I would hope you were using either Google Documents or Microsoft before. Start there.
Yes, start there. You have to start, it sounds like, where you're most comfortable, get get your bearings, so to speak, and then start to do other things versus jumping into, because everybody's talking about Claude. That's all I'm hearing now.
Everybody. And
Everybody's
let me
talking
be
about
clear,
Claude.
Claude is absolutely amazing. The way I'm over here coding websites and hosting them, I mean, I can do one in 10 minutes on any subject in brand colors. However, I have 20 years of technology training. I'm an early adopter to these tools. I was doing it with the purpose 20 years ago, which I would call a 2-for-1, which is now a 4-for-1. So let me kind of go back 20 years ago. I started using technology because I wasn't, my undergrad and master's degree are in marketing. And so I was reading in 2006, right, 20 years ago, the profile of buyers and sellers from the National Association of Realtors. I do about 100 speaking engagements per year just for real estate associations, banks, title companies, and multiple listing services. And it told me that search was on the internet. And I Googled my name and it came up fewer than 10 times. I started using social media to be found not only on the social platforms, but for search engine optimization. Well, today, that same content allows me to be found for answer engine optimization and generative engine optimization. So today, if I post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, I'm getting a 4-for-1 return. But I was already intentional. AI just shifted it. And so everybody wants to hit the ground running and they have no tech experience and they don't want to pay $20 a month for a subscription.
Right, right. You know, as my grandmother would say, you're not new to this, you're true to this. So when you
I
get in
am.
here, you didn't just start. You didn't just start. So everybody listening, 20 years in the game of this, so she understands what she's doing. So that being said, let me ask you this, because I don't want to go too deep into the specificity, because we just said you need to study and understand before you leap, before you land, so to speak. But what do you think meeting planners or things around the speaking space, Marki, what are they looking at now that AI has been introduced, perhaps differently of us as speakers, either before or after they set us up for a
Well,
gig?
let me tell you what the
Please.
CEO of the National Speakers Association said over on LinkedIn. She
Please.
said that meeting planners are now going to go to a generative platform to search for what it is that they want. Therefore, once she made the comment, I took myself right on over there to ChatGPT, Gemini AI, Perplexity, and Claude to see what would come up for artificial intelligence speakers in real estate or for realtors. And Marky Lemon's Rhyal came up in every last one of those searches.
Nice.
But I'm intentional. So when I say I'm intentional, the things that allow me to come up for what it is I say that I do, one is content, two is video content. But I've been doing this, remember, since 2019 when I launched the podcast because I was recording in video then. Now, with that being said, I do a monthly press release. I put out a weekly newsletter. I post something every single day on social media. I have a national syndicated column. So I'm putting all of this content out because you cannot act like you don't know what it is I do for a living when I'm
Mm.
gainfully self-employed.
Nice, very nice. And speaking of your content, I saw an article that you just wrote last month on women in menopause and the jobs that you were saying were impacted by that. Can you touch on that piece a little bit, because that's a very interesting and important topic?
I can talk about it. I went into menopause the first day of the first of three surgeries I had. When I tell you I was broke down, I had plantar fasciitis, frozen shoulder, brain fog, eye fatigue, hearing loss, gut health issues. I had an MRI, X-rays,
Okay,
physical
so we only got
therapy.
30 minutes on this podcast,
Okay, I
Marky.
know.
How many?
I got to break it down for you, right? Because it was
A
I
lot.
was at the end of my ropes, right?
Yes.
And so what I realized is that in the world of real estate, it is ranked number 7 among high performing midlife women, but it's a 66% female dominated industry with the number one age being 57.
Mm.
What I realized is I've been teaching women in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause in female dominated industries. Therefore, I started doing my own studies around artificial intelligence overcompensating for brain fog, eye fatigue, hearing loss to allow you to spend time at the doctor to get the right diagnosis and not lose your edge while doing your job. Because women, from the time in which they're diagnosed, tend to see a 10% decrease in their earnings. And all I could say to myself is, I
Mm.
know you lying. I'm the institutional knowledge of the National Association of Realtors. I'm the institutional knowledge of numerous organizations, and I don't want to lose my edge. Therefore, I leverage artificial intelligence to keep my edge because I have no control over these hormones. I can try to regulate them and get them in control, and I take HRT, but that AI was doing that work for me while I was losing my mental edge. And I know that was a
Mm.
mouthful, but I think that the institutional knowledge of organizations, and there I have my top 20, um, deserves to understand that they can hold on to their edge leveraging artificial intelligence.
No, that was a mouthful, but it was also a spirit full, because you gave a lot with that statement. Because things happen, life happens, health issues can happen, circumstances beyond our control. And in the speaker business, we understand that better perhaps than any other industry, because with COVID and other things, we literally had to pivot the entire way we do what we do. We had to.
Yes,
Now,
we did.
on that vein, Marky, what are some ways, or what are some things? Because you just mentioned, and you're ahead of the game. You've always been ahead of the game. It sounds like you were doing some of the things that many of us are just catching up to today, or maybe we were doing it and didn't realize what it was that we were doing. What is it that you think on that same train that speakers need to do to keep themselves cutting edge, to stay on top of their business, whether they are AI experts like you, or whatever it is that they do, what's unique in their fields? What is it that you recommend that speakers do to stay ahead, even if it is leveraging AI again in some way?
Well, I definitely believe that they should leverage AI, but I think that a lot of people have failed to realize they're content creators. And one thing that we're pivoting to right now is being an influencer, because influencers can charge more money. I am always looking at how am I going to earn the most amount of money in the least amount of time. And I'm
Mm.
saying this because I am the shortest, darkest, roundest person with the least amount of hair in every room I am in. They view being short as a negative. They view being overweight as a negative. They look at being bald headed as a negative. But once I said I'm the institutional knowledge, I refuse to make less. I want to earn exactly what it is that I believe that I should earn. Therefore, I'm sitting down and I'm consistently reading studies. I want to understand where the market is going and how things are pivoting. When I've done that historically in the past, it is what has allowed me 27 years in the real estate industry to consistently be able to grow. Okay. And I equated to, there was a time I felt like I was always chasing the bus. Now, I don't know if you ever had to chase a bus. What
I took the
speakers will
bus.
understand this, right? You've had to chase a bus, a train, or a plane. right?
Okay.
And
Yes.
it's exhausting, right? Or
Yes.
that layover, right? I wanted to get to a point in life that I was always sitting there waiting for the transportation to arrive, that I could stop chasing. And so, leveraging technology 20 years ago and always studying my industry is what has allowed me to differentiate myself from my competition. But what has changed in the world is if you aren't in constant learning mode, you will be left behind.
You hear that? Left behind, chasing, not waiting for the bus or the train or the plane, but chasing it. And you reverse that. I
I want to sit
appreciate
there,
that.
look, with my mobile device,
Yes. Yes. Sit
a
back.
Diet Coke if I get a moment,
Yes.
popping
Yes.
my gum, just sitting there waiting. It's a different feeling. I don't want to feel exhausted, and I have felt exhausted in the past.
Wow. Even just hearing that was like a relief. You don't want to feel exhausted. And there is a time in which, when perhaps you're younger in the career or you have the ability, the agility to do it, that you are running and it's okay. But especially when you become more seasoned, as I like to say I am, I share with you, my son's going to be 30 next month and I have a 26-year-old. So at this point in my life, I totally understand what you're saying. No more running. Been there, done that, chasing. Not trying to do that at this next quarter of life, so to speak.
Mm-mm.
Speaking of the quarters of life, so what are some things, Marky, that you wish you could have told your younger self, if anything, when you started out in the speaker business? It sounds like you were already pretty locked and loaded, but is there any one thing, or if not to yourself, that you would advise someone who's just putting their toe in the water to become a part of our profession?
I will say this. I looked at a couple of women who were very successful in the world of real estate, and I mimicked some of their behaviors, how they dressed, how they carried themselves. And I'm going to say this, and some women might not appreciate it, even how they leave their husbands at home. And I mocked their behavior. And I always look who is the most successful in the room and how do they behave and how do they navigate. So, the same way that I studied trends, I've studied people. And there's just certain things based on perception that are real. But once you build goodwill and you give to others, you can then come and change some of the rules. But there are people I see now who want to force a change and they have not built any goodwill. No, you come, you study, and you adapt with the plan on what will you change in the future, because it's a lot easier to change if you've built some goodwill.
I feel like this is a sermon. I feel like it's a mantra. I feel like it's more than just an interview with you, Marquis, because that is very true. It's not saying that you can't institute change. You just have to study, be a student first. I like to
Yes,
say, God on the
there.
side versus a sage on the stage, or whatever it is. You don't just jump in and start. You have to listen. You have to listen, right? Like the
Right, you
listen to this podcast. You have to listen and
listen.
learn first.
Yeah, and
Yes.
you talking about in some organizations, you said that you've been a member for 20 years, right? I've
Yes.
been in real
Yes.
estate
This one.
27 years. And what
Mhm.
people don't know is some of us know where the bodies are buried. We know the right, we know the CEO before the CEO before the CEO. We could tell you how we arrived at this place right now. And
Correct.
someone will come in and they won't have any of that institutional knowledge, right? And they'll want instant change based on, and we have a lot of egos in the speaking business on
No.
who they are. Let me tell you one thing I learned in psychology. I use the disc all the time. When I
Yes.
had the opportunity to work at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, it's not
Mm.
about me. It is my responsibility to be like a chameleon and to pivot my personality to the people in which I'm selling with.
Mm.
I keep that first and foremost. Even though I am gainfully self employed and have been self employed my entire life, I
Gainfully. You all hear that key
gainfully,
word. Gainfully.
gainfully, well, let me say this, profitable and
That's
gainfully
what
self
gainfully to
employed.
me profitable. Yes.
Right, right.
Gainfully.
Um, I get to say this. I work for 100 different organizations every single year. The person who signs my check is my boss. And I'm going to pivot I don't like talking on the telephone, but they have the option to schedule a phone call with me anytime their heart desires because that
Yes.
might be their preferred method of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that we have to understand the younger person coming into business think that the world revolves around them. I'm going to tell you, absolutely not. Even some seasoned professionals whose businesses haven't grown and aren't going the way in which they want it to go, it is not about you. It is 100% about catering to the needs and the wants of the organization. And I'm
Yes.
not talking about you bending over backwards. I'm pretty firm in my beliefs, and uh, I don't tolerate any disrespect or work with inconsiderate people. So we have a
Well,
mutual, healthy, respectful relationship, but they're my boss.
two-way, two-way street.
They're my boss.
Two-way street. They're the boss, but
They're
two-way
the boss.
street. They're the boss. They
Yes,
pay
they
the
are.
cost to be the boss. What is it that you want to say? Now, this Speakernomics platform, again, is wonderful. It's an opportunity for speakers to learn from those of us in the business. You, Marki, who's dropped several gems with us for this time. We're wrapping it up soon. What are some things that you can say? And this is going to be a two-part question. First, let's start with NSA specifically. What are some ways in which you have leveraged your membership in this organization that you are proudest of? I see you're a CSP. So what are some ways that you've leveraged your membership in this organization? And then the second part of the question is, how would you recommend, or what would you recommend for others to do the same?
Well, actually, I wasn't leveraging my membership. And actually, when I earned the CSP, it was my first influence I had attended, even though I had attended a conference in 2019, but it wasn't influence. So it was kind of a shock that I earned the CSP uh, and had never attended influence. So I'm gonna tell you right now that threw a lot of people off. They like, huh? No, had never. But I was building a speaking business, right? So with that being said, this is a business. And when I earned the CSP, I said, I am now going to leverage my membership more. This is my second time being interviewed on Speakernomics. I've done webinars. I will be speaking at Influence this year. I even attended the CSP Summit. At every last one of these events, I am learning something new and networking with someone to implement just maybe one change in my business. One of the reasons I did it was because in the world of real estate education, I wanted to go out and find the best education for what it is that I profess that I do. And I don't believe that there's any better education or higher education when it comes to building your speaker business than the National Speakers Association. I would encourage people to be more involved sooner than I was. But I will also say this, in the world of real estate, I am a 5-time Hall of Fame inductee. I've gone as deep and as wide as one can go in the world of real estate. You're going to have to strategically align, and I've come from contribution and volunteering. And now I'm bringing that into NSA, what I've been doing in the world of real estate for the past 27 years.
Nice. Wow. And that is unusual to earn your CSP prior to attending an influence, but that's how we do. I mean, you have three names, Marki Lemons Rouse, I'm Shanita Baraka Akintonde. You know, when you have three names, that's coming with something, right? Speakernomics with
Ah,
two names. But in either case, I was Chicago hot dog happy, Marki, to find out I was interviewing you. And this has really, truly been a treat. I've learned, I already was a student of your background. I knew a lot about you prior to the interview. I did some additional research, as any good interviewer should do, but just listening to you and your style and your presence, even on this video screen. So I can only imagine you in person, as they say, diminutive perhaps in stature, but huge, humongous in presence. So thank you for sharing
thank you.
all that you shared with us, and I look forward to connecting with you either at Influence and or beyond. We're right here in the city together, and you got to give
We
me some of that
are.
Limbs barbecue, girl. I didn't
We
know about
are.
the history of that.
And let
One,
me tell you one thing in
please.
closing. And
Please.
I'm only 5'1.5". I have seen
Wow.
people's eyes drop when I walk in because they like, but you're such a big personality. Yes, and I'm only 5'1.5". I need I need
At that
all of
hand.
it.
At that hand. And she is the president of Remarkable. So that goes to say, because you are remarkable. And as I
Thank you.
said, this has been great. So thank you,
Thank you.
Marki, and thank you, listeners. And we'll close out on that note, okay? All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Speakernomics. If you want more bookings, credibility, and connections, your NSA community is waiting for you. Join NSA today. Click the link below and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and download this podcast wherever you listen.